My guest this evening is a talented actor, writer, producer, and director. For over 20 years, he has utilized his artistic and creative talents to entertain and inform thousands of patrons. Please welcome to the Eclectic Arts Virtual Studio, Brad Cerenzia. Brad.
Hello there. Thank you for having me here, Mark.
No, thank you for joining me. And again, like we were talking pre-show, sometimes things just kind of fall into place.
Yeah.
I just got super lucky. I'm so grateful that you're able to join me tonight. So
yeah,
welcome.
Very glad to be here. Thank you.
Awesome. So with most of the guests that I've done interviews with, and this is interview 26.
Nice.
Yeah. Obviously, things have been kind of up and down with the pandemic and the protests and Black Lives Matter. And now we're moving officially into summer. And here living in Washington, there's been an uptick in COVID-19 in Arizona, Texas, Florida. How are you doing and coping during this, crazy time?
Yeah, there's a lot there. On the artistic side of things, I was working on a show. I was co-producing an off-Broadway show that opened in January. It was called Emoji Land, and we got a New York's critic pick. We got tons of great reviews. We got award nominations, and then COVID happened. And so, New York had to shut down. Our show had to shut down. We're unsure exactly of what the path is going to be, but we know it's, we're in the same boat as thousands and thousands of other actors across the nation, across the world. So while we're taking time to lick our wounds, we're also trying to do what we can to be there for our friends who are going through the same thing. I have a lot of friends in New York who are in the process of looking for a new house somewhere. They're moving back with their parents. One of my friends moved back to New Jersey. She just couldn't afford her apartment in the city. And, everything's changing. So, and at the same time, with Black Lives Matter being such a forefront issue right now, the things that we've been doing in Seattle have been really important in terms of listening to what our Black brothers and sisters are saying we can do to be useful, and then doing those things, shutting up and listening, reading White Fragility, reading The New Jim Crow, but mostly just shutting up, stop offering opinions about how we think people should protest. My background, I have kind of a queer liberation background from the early 90s in Seattle. So I've been in protests, I've been in marches, and I know how incredibly frustrating it is to have people who consider themselves allies speak for you. So I'm employing what I learned about what annoyed me to try to provide the same guidance to myself and to the people around me, to just be quiet and listen and be there with the outrage, be there with the discomfort of being someone who benefits from white privilege in society. It's okay to feel bad, and you don't have to understand everything, but you do have to trust that when people are telling you this is what they're experiencing, this is what they're experiencing. So just shut up and be there.
Yeah, no, very well said. I know when we had some guests on right when the protests happened on that first Friday here in Seattle, and then over that weekend, and then with Blackout Tuesday, that we were talking about that with some of my guests, that for myself, that it really was a case of trying to stop and actually listen and really listen, and not sit there and try to put my own opinion or my own spin on something, because that's not what it was about at all. Trying to rethink and reprocess how I view certain topics. I remember I thought, oh yeah, I'm good in that area. And then I kind of realized when I stepped back, it's like, no, actually I'm not. I'm actually part of the problem. I didn't even realize it, but that's part of that education, and that's part of that process. And like you said, though, the bottom line becomes trusting what someone else is saying to you, instead of you trying to spin it around to something that feels comfortable for you and makes you feel better.
Yeah, because none of us want to know that we've done things that have been overtly or covertly racist to our friends and family and coworkers, but we have. That's what happens. There's covert homophobia and there's overt homophobia, and whether or not you mean it, whatever your intention is actually irrelevant. Your heart can be in the right place, but you can still be a jerk. So yeah,
very much so. So since we're kind of on this topic, and it is considered Pride Weekend, Pride Month, what are your opinions on that? Since you just said that you were there protesting and marching back as early as the 90s on these issues that are personal to you. How do you feel about the Pride movement?
Oh, I'm really blown away for a couple of reasons. It took a really, really long time for people to, I guess, not even become comfortable, become tolerant, which I hate that word, but you tolerate a barking dog, next door. You tolerate a flu. You tolerate something that you don't like. I don't want to be tolerated. I want to be liked. Sometimes you can't have that right out of the gate, baby steps. But I will say I am just blown away at how much has changed just even in the last couple of years, where trans has become such an identity that that people are talking about before it needed to go through all of the same decades of liberation that they were with us all along. But just people talking about trans now, I think it's so amazing. And me having a chance to know trans folks and again, just shut up and listen. It's not an experience that I've ever had. It's not something that I can identify personally. So the best thing that I can do is listen to what their experiences are as a human and as a trans identifying person. So with queer liberation and as we add on letters to our name, yay, make that freaking flag more colorful. It's better to have numbers. It's better to be stronger in numbers. And I think at the same time, I'm seeing that with Black Lives Matter. I'm seeing Black Trans Lives Matter as well as a subset, but really a really strong component of that, because you can't be for one and not for the other. You can't say, well, I'm not comfortable with Black trans lives, so I'm not going to support them. Then you're not supporting Black lives, because they are. And as part of the queer culture, LGBTQIA is important to be all together, because we are an identity, because we are challenging mainstream heteronormative behaviors and expectations, because we are all there, even though we're not sitting together, in the same bars perhaps, but we are all there together in the same fight for this identity.
Wow, no, that was quite educational, I'll be honest, for myself even. I know that my first experience with the Pride parade movement things here in Seattle was back in 2009 when I was volunteering to help set up the parade down on 4th Avenue.
Yeah.
And
I was so nervous. I have to tell you really quick, I was so nervous when we moved down. I was really excited about that nervousness, because there's one thing about marching in your own community. There's one thing like about marching down Broadway. And then there's this whole other thing about marching downtown and marching past the stores you shop in and marching past tourists. And it was the right kind of nervousness that we needed to keep our community activated and motivated, because you realize that that feeling of safety. I'm 47 years old, and I still, I've been with my husband for 16 years. I'm 47 years old, and I still have to do a safety check when I pick him up from work and give him a kiss. How effed up is that I still have to be worried about getting the crap beaten out of me at 47 years old? But that's the reality. That's the reality that we live in. So continue. You're saying you were setting up.
Oh yeah, that my first time down there was in 2009, helping set up the parade and being down there for that experience, and that actually came through some young people that I was working with. I asked them, "What are you doing on Sunday?" They said, "Oh, we're going to be setting up at the Pride Parade." And I'm like, "Oh, that sounds interesting or fun. Do they need some more help?" And so I'm sure they could use some more help down there. And it was one of the most eye-opening experiences for me in the best possible way. And I tend to be kind of a quiet, reserved person anyway, so I do just sit back and kind of take things in and listen as much as I can. And the folks that I got to meet that were helping set us, and we were helping with all the floats, and the people that were getting really anxious about their floats and everything. It was just it was really eye-opening, but at the end of the day, it was also really positive, really fun, really something that made me really start to check how I view things and how I do things. And I went back the next year and the next year, and it's been that instance is what really kind of shifted my way of thinking. Not that it was necessarily a horrible way of thinking, but it wasn't that way of thinking until I was actually experiencing something firsthand. And also talking to people, just like you just said, talking to people that this has been their life, this has been their experience for the entirety of their life, that they have to be wary of this area, these people, this kind of thing, that if somebody sees it, they might react violently, they might react in some sort of other way. And that was just something that, for me being a person of color, I thought, well, that's exactly what I have to deal with in certain ways.
Right.
But I don't want to make it, that's not my experience. And just like for, I'm not black.
But it is that the sympathy that, like, there are experiences that you have that I will never understand. There are jokes that are made that are offensive to you that don't hit me the same way. When I hear someone say no homo, and then they're just like, oh, that's so gay. Like, all those things, even though they don't mean it maliciously, it still is. It really still is degrading and debasing. And jokes that are told about Asians and jokes that are told about blacks, the stereotypes that we talk about and the names that we make fun of. Growing up, I remember in the 70s, I grew up in Spokane. I remember all the Pollock jokes. I don't know. None of us even had an idea what the hell Pollock was. But for some reason, we all had, dozens and dozens of Pollock jokes. And I look back and I think, wow, who did I know whose family, had immigrated to the U.S. from Poland, whose family had that background? What was that like? The blonde jokes that were really popular in the 90s, the Karen jokes that are really popular now. I think, like, I feel bad for my good friends named Karen, because I'm like, oh, that's a lot. That's a burden. Some of it can be malicious, but I wouldn't say that. Yeah. Anyway, the Karen stuff is identifying bad behavior. It's just sad that they get saddled with that. But we do those things. We don't understand the impact to those around us until someone steps out and says, hey, this is really bothering me because of X, Y, or Z.
Yeah, no, I mean, this is a really good discussion right now, because it reminds me of, so I grew up in Kirkland, which for those out there, it's a suburb of Seattle, and it was in the 70s, which was 99% Caucasian. I had one Asian friend, and I don't even know why he was living out there, to be honest with you. My parents deliberately moved out there to get away from South Seattle, where they had grown up. They didn't want to raise their children in that environment.
What part of South Seattle were they in?
In the ID.
Oh, okay, yeah. I'm in South Park, so I'm just a little south. So I'm like, yeah, I get it.
Yeah, so they grew up with in the international district. I should have said that, because people out there, they don't know what the ID is. And they wanted to take us all the way out to Kirkland. And so I had racial identity issues, because I thought it was like all my friends were all Caucasian except for the one. Mm-hmm. And so it wasn't until someone pointed out that I was different by my eyes or my face being flat or any of these other kind of things that happened in elementary school all the time. And at the time, I didn't think much of it, because I'm kind of like, oh, just some kid being a jerk. But I didn't realize they're being a jerk for racial reasons. And even that kid may not necessarily have known that, may have learned it from parents or whoever they're around. But it wasn't until I was older that I started thinking, damn.
Really You look back on that. I look back on John Hughes movies. Like, I loved all the John Hughes movies, but I look back on them and I'm just like, man, like, all the slur at the time was queer and fag and homo. And I'm like, yeah, I remember living through that and being terrified that if I reacted to that in any other way than with acknowledgement that that's, humorous, I remember just being terrified that I was going to be outed by my, my disdain for, homophobic slurs. So yeah, we grow up with that stuff. We look back and we think, Jesus, how did we make it through that?
Yeah. And somehow we did. And somehow we learned and educated other people and continue to do that. And I know I'm not just speaking for myself. It'll be something that I'll be doing till the day I die. It has to be that way. You can't just do it a little bit. You can't just say, well, I'm going to turn it off today. It's like, no, it's a part of who you are. And you have to educate people as much as you can. So,
yeah.
Wow. And I think that's,
go ahead. Sorry. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say that I think that that's, one of the reasons that a lot of people find their space in art, find their voice in art, find their life in art. When you've gone through something that's different from the majority culture, whether it's white majority or heterosexual majority, or wealth majority, or whether it's national pride majority, like all of these different ways that we have to eke out our childhood and our adolescence. I think a lot of us find our voice then in being able to tell our stories in the context of how that affects our identity and how we intersect with white privilege or heterosexual privilege, or all of those things that come up. It's, for me, certainly, one of the first things that one of the first projects that I ever got a chance to work on. I was 16 years old, and I was in high school, and my counselor told me about an internship with the LSB Theater, which was a theater here in Seattle. And at that time, it was just doing amazing things. But it was the Gay and Lesbian Theater for All People. And I'd come out in high school, so my high school counselor was like, "Hey, there's an internship if you want to go, work on and be a stagehand on this show called The Gay Deceivers." So I didn't tell my parents what it was. I went and did the internship, and it was from the Quakers, who were really investing in social justice at the time. So you've got this queer theater with, radical Quakers, and then me as a newly out high school kid living in Renton, Washington at 16. And that opened up the door for me to see queer people working as professional actors, being themselves, telling their stories. And to this day, I still know 70% of the people that I was working on that show with, and they are my mentors. They're people that I adore and look up to so much.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing that story. And I think this, like you said, that you had a chance to be around folks that became your mentors and became people that you looked up to and are still, dear friends to this day. It reminds me, again, a little bit of my own, I guess, my own journey, that growing up in Kirkland, and my first career jobs were in Bothell, and also, which is also the east side of Seattle for those watching this. I didn't start working around people of color per se until 2001, and I'm 50 now, so it wasn't that long ago. And I was working in South Seattle, right off Rainer Avenue, and most of the students that were in my program were African American, Spanish, some Asian, and maybe one or two Caucasian. And I was two things. We had a lot of racial diversity, we had religious diversity, we had English as a second language, and we also had gang issues down there. So I remember when I accepted that job, I was kind of like, what did I get myself into? Because I was not comfortable at all being down there. But I knew that if I talked to them as students first and got to hear their stories and hear where they're coming from, that way, that'll steer me in whichever direction I needed to teach these children. So it wasn't about get the best math lesson plan or the best English lesson plan. It was, let me understand these guys first, because these students that I got were kicked out of the Seattle school district. So they've already had, they don't trust adults. They don't trust pretty much anyone. And then here's somebody else that says, okay, you can't go back to your school until you complete my program, and I want you to do this. It's like, no, I need to understand these guys. And it took a long while. I would say it was probably the first semester before I was actually truly comfortable going into that place every single day, knowing what kind of students I was going to work with. And it turned out that some of the things that I was maybe fearful of, you found out this is a 12-year-old kid. This is not someone who's 22, something that you read in the newspaper, see on the television. And so I already had preconceived notions that started to get squashed. That I remember, not to take up too much time during this, but I think we're having a good discussion.
Yeah,
I think one thing that happened was that right around the holidays, around Christmas time, the first year I was there, I was telling them some memories of baking cookies at Christmas time, because that's something I used to love with my family, with my brother and my mom and my dad. And all of them were looking at me like, what are you talking about? I've never done that before. And I was like, you've never made any kind of cookies for Christmas? And they're like, no. So I was like, okay, we're going to make some cookies for Christmas. And I don't care, where we figure this out. I had to go borrow a church's kitchen. We had a bus up there and the whole bit. And I wish I had taken pictures of this, because they're in their aprons and they got flour on their hands. It's in their hair, and they're having the best time from all walks of life. And they were just so thankful. And those guys, I still remember this to this day. They said, hey, Mr. S, shouldn't we give some of these cookies to some people on the staff? I didn't bring that up. They did. So I'm like, you guys are just blowing me away with your generosity, and you're educating me. You're the teacher right now. I'm the student. I'm the one who's learning something from you. And it stayed with me all this time. That's kind of how that became that process of really trying to unlearn biases I had, and then trying to learn new things. And it was so important to me. I still carry it to this day.
I bet they do too.
I hope so. I actually ran into a couple of them when they're in high school, and there was one young man that was, gosh, he must have been like 6'2" at that time. And when I had him, he was a little seventh grader, like 5 foot or whatever.
Uh-huh.
I heard from across the hall at this community center, "Hey, Mr. S." And I'm like, turned around. I'm like, I know he's got to be a former student, but I didn't recognize him at all. And he saw that on my face, and he was like, "You don't remember who I am, do you?" And I'm like, "No, man, sorry, I don't remember you." And he told me his name, and I was like, "Oh my gosh!" I remembered exactly who he was and all the problems he gave me in class, and we laughed about it. But he was in high school, he had a job, he was doing well, and I said, "Man, this is the best gift you could have given me, is that here we are 3 or 4 years later after you worked with me. One, you didn't want to kill me, and two, you have actually got your life turned around." And when he said that I had something to do with that, then it was like, then it's all worth it. That's really what it's all about. So wow.
Humanity, who knew? When you open yourself up and are vulnerable and accept correction and take people for the stories that they all are and that we all are, your life is very, very different. It's very, very different than a Kirkland-based life.
Very true, sir.
Although that has its pluses too, I guess. I don't know. I can't imagine, but I live in South Park, and we're this scrappy little industrial area in Seattle. We're between the only river in Seattle and a couple freeways, and we're surrounded by industrial. And our neighborhood is really, really wonderfully diverse. We have a bunch of refugees and asylees, and it's majority Latino and Vietnamese, and we've just got this great mix. So we're a really, really tight-knit community as well, which is fun. We've all learned a lot being able to share things with each other. Like, none of us call the police. Like, if there's something that's annoying, that our neighbors are doing, or that we're worried about something, we all understand now the danger that our neighbors can experience just by having the police come to their door. Whether or not I want that to be true, it doesn't matter. The reality is, when you show up with a gun and an attitude sometimes, and it's over something stupid like a loud party, things go wrong, and we see that time and time again. And so all of the Black lives that have been lost, and the ones that have been lost just in the past, that we're also now talking about, and bringing up those names and saying those names, and recognizing what's led to that. That's really important for us as our community of neighbors and artists here, especially too in South Park. And a lot of families with kids in the local schools, we all come together and try to do what we can to be there for each other.
Yeah, again, very well said. And it's actually really a great segue, because you were telling me something before during the pre-show of what you've been doing in your community during this pandemic. Could you speak to that in terms of the food stuff that you're doing?
Yeah, there's this badass neighbor that we have named LaShawna, and her Venmo is "Look for the Helpers." If you want to donate, it's all one, not the number 4, but look FOR the Helpers. She pitched several of us and said, "Hey, there's probably going to be a quarantine coming. There's probably going to be a lockdown. We already know that families are losing their jobs. The main breadwinner of the family, is going to get laid off. The kids that are in school, where they used to get breakfast and lunch and then weekend food to go home, all that's going to be shut down. What are we going to do?" So several of us came together and said, well, yeah, we want to be involved. We went out and did some fundraising, and just with our families and friends. And we were able to get a couple big orders from Cisco Foods, from Costco, from Restaurant Depot, from some of the food pantries. But we created pop-up pantries in front of our houses and in our parking spots. And so I think we're either on day 101 or 102 of having food out every single day for anyone who needs it for free. I just had a big delivery today, and I had so many people swing by to pick up strawberries and milk and yogurt and bread that we got from Macrina Bakery and from Safeway, and from a food pantry. And so, the ability for us to do things to help our neighbors at least know that they're going to have food on their table makes me happy. And I will tell you, I would never ever have talked about this before. I don't believe in talking about I don't believe in talking about good deeds. I don't consider this a good deed. I think this is a necessity for our neighborhood. I'm also pitching look for the helpers on Venmo for money. It goes to Lashana, and then she places the orders and receipts are available. So all of this money is going right to food for families.
That is amazing. And I understand what you're saying, that you're not trying to self-promote something, especially during this time. That's not the reason why you're doing it. It's a necessity. But yeah, at the same time, to keep this going for umpteen days down the road, because we were just talking that there's such a question mark over everything.
Yeah. Thanks, Texas and Florida.
Yeah. And Arizona.
And, what? Yeah.
And it's just crazy. But again, for people that are watching this and people that are in the Twitch chat right now, it's hearing these kind of stories serves a purpose, though, because there's so much negativity of things going on. When you get that positive silver lining piece, I know for myself, I grasp onto that because I want something like that to help balance out all the stuff that's going on out there right now. And sometimes we need that break,
isn't it?
It is.
Yeah, there's just so much. I will tell you, I've had a chance to meet a lot of my unsheltered neighbors who I hadn't met before and who I probably had opinions about just based on assumptions about, whatever, just the things that you grow up with. And I've had a chance to actually sit down, and I'm humbled. Like I'm humbled by I'm humbled by the humanity that we're all able to show each other right now. It's really, it's been really eye-opening for me. I always considered myself someone who's progressive and independent and, thoughtful. But then you still get a chance to peel back those layers that you didn't know were there. So I'm really thankful to the group that I'm working with right now, for helping keep this going for over 100 days. And my stuff is out there 24/7 now as well. And I have plastic bags, and people swing by at all hours and pick stuff up. And I'm thrilled. And we also put out some masks as well, because there was a lady who came today who was using an eye mask as her mask because it's all that she had. So like we're, just be aware of the people around you, and be humbled by the fact that you're all here together, and you need to trust people's stories and just listen to who they are and help them how you can.
Again, I mean, so well said, and the sentiment is taken to heart by me. And I think, lots of people out there that are thinking the same way and trying to do something, whatever that is in your, in your life, in your journey, and whatever that you try to do, if that's listening, if that's something physically that you're trying to do, if that's some bigger movement, if that's from monetarily, whatever it is, if you're doing something in that direction, then more power to you.
Yeah, I will tell you, get some top ramen and put it on your steps. Just get some bags of top ramen and just leave it out. It will be gone. Someone will eat it. Someone will take that and use it for their meal. You don't have to have a huge pantry stocked with a walk-in freezer. It's just, you can go to your local grocery store and, get some scratch and dent vegetables and stuff that, they're going to throw out. You can ask them, hey, do you have anything you just give us? I have a pantry at my house that we're just putting stuff out for our neighbors who need it. And we've gotten donations. You can too.
Awesome. Wow. This may be one of the best and most important interviews I've actually done, and it wasn't planned out that way. Thank you so much for having this discussion for the last 30 minutes. And but I do want to make sure that I change gears a little bit.
Sure.
Not that what we just talked about isn't important, obviously, but I first got to know you when you were putting on Disenchanted.
Yeah.
And I want to hear that whole story of what that was like going from beginning to end, because it sounded like just a humongous task for you to make this show come to life here in Seattle. So can you speak to that, please?
For sure. Yeah. So I've never been one to take on small challenges for whatever reason. Probably I should have along the way. I really like moonshots. I really like the adventure of not having a path and figuring it out. So I was an associate producer when Disenchanted premiered off Broadway back in 2014, 2015. I didn't have any involvement with that other than just being in on meetings and helping fund and as an investor. When you're an associate, you get like 2 tickets to opening night, and then that's it. And you know, you may or may not ever see anything again from the money side. Um, but I'd known the co-creators for a really long time, and I'd met them here in Seattle when they were producing their own theater in the Broadway market back in the early 90s. And I just adore the guys. They're wonderful. Dennis Giacino and Feli Matias. And so I had been trying for about 2 years to get the rights to produce it in Seattle, but it was on a tour. All the cities were locked down, but finally it became available. So I jumped at it. And luckily, I asked Dennis and Feli if they would direct as well, because I really love Feli's direction. He was the original off-Broadway director. And Dennis Giacino is books, music, lyrics. But they co-created, this wonderful piece. So they said yes. They came up from, I think they were living in Portland at the time. They moved up to Seattle for about 6 weeks to work on this project. So the theater spaces, the only thing that I had available on the timeline that I wanted was at 12th Avenue Arts, and it was in July and August, and everyone said, don't produce in July and August, it's impossible. And I was like, I'll do it anyway. And we were competing with what's the Capitol Hill Music Festival? What is that?
The Block Party.
The Block Party, where there's like 40 or 50,000 people a block away. So there was that. There was Seafair. There was gorgeous Seattle, July and August, which don't tell anyone, but that's like the best time to be here. What else? There's some other. Oh, the parade, the Seafair parade, Seafair itself. So I was competing with a lot of stuff. So I really had to buckle down and do my work. I made a list of people that I had never met before, but who had produced in the area, and asked them out to breakfast and lunch. And so many of them graciously gave me their time to sit down, and I would pitch an idea and say, well, here's what I'm thinking of. Tell me what I'm missing or what I'm doing wrong. Got some amazing feedback from people, mostly around budget. Like, really? That's your budget? And I was like, oh, I'm doomed. In for a penny, in for a pound. All right. Putting together the production team, making sure that we had the right balance of perspectives so that it wasn't just, a solid slate of, white men. That was really important to me. When I started my theater company, Mamchez Productions, Mamchez is named after my acting coach, who passed away a few years ago. And she was such a powerhouse in teaching and educating people who didn't know that they could be actors, and breaking down those walls, and really, especially with women, really helping people find their voices. And so I named my theater company after her. And I also decided, I really want to do fun, mischievous works of art that really feature, roles for women. And so, with that, the planning around that was, in Seattle with incredibly talented people to work with. And so, it was really finding out from, the people had been producers, finding out who they had worked with, who they liked to work with, who they would recommend for this project. And then, talking about marketing and meeting with marketing people and figuring out what's the best way to market the show. Booking the rentals with Theater Puget Sound for doing our, our auditions, and then doing the rehearsals, and then finding the cast. That was really amazing as well, because I think we saw over 300 people for the 6 roles in the show.
Wow.
Yeah. And it was just like, there was an embarrassment of riches with the women performers in Seattle. We really, again, talk about being humbled, talk about being just someone who's in the room. And yes, I'm a singer, actor, dancer, or I'm a triple threat. I don't sing, I don't act, I don't dance. And I do all those things, but being in the room and seeing these people, seeing these women bring in their craft and their just this talent. Oh, amazing. So we cast it, and then, started building the set. We ended up bigger than we initially planned, it ended up being gorgeous anyway. I built a lot of the set with my friends. And I found in Seattle, if you ask for favors and ask for help, a lot of times people are willing to give it to you. I'm always willing to go and paint scenery. Even if it's just me putting on an audiobook and painting the stage back to black or whatever. So I was lucky to have like Phil Lacey from Gilbert and Sullivan Society. They have a shop and performance or rehearsal space that we were able to use to build our big set. And so, just along the way, Driftwood Theater let us use some of their platforms to build onto. And then Center Stage Theater, the executive director and the artistic director there, Trista Duvall and Angela Baylor, they were great to work with because they also helped me, think about marketing, because they're in Federal Way, which is just about 20 miles south of Seattle. So how they market a show is different than how a lot of theaters would market a show in Seattle. But knowing that I had to compete with the same kind of things that they have to compete with, like distance, I was thinking they're probably going to have some good insights. And so, being able to call on the community and now also to be a person who people call on has been the best treat along the way for me. Besides selling out like 77% of the seats, which was a hell of a lot of work, but we kept the theater full and air conditioned and laughing. So it was good.
Yeah, no, I can attest to all of that. It was air conditioned, it was funny, and it was packed. And like you said, this makes so much more sense to me that you had like 300 talented people to choose from for the cast, because the cast you had, it was like, they're all leads. I mean, they're all leads.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing in the show. It's like, it's a lot of music, a lot of comedy. The comedy was the hard part. Like, you can see a lot of really amazing singers. I produced the show out of New York this past October, and we presented it in Connecticut. And so we cast out of New York. We rehearsed in New York. We flew our Princess Who Kissed the Frog from Seattle out to New York because we just knew. Her name's Cammie Smith, and she's wonderful. You've probably seen her Reboot Theater. She was in Sweeney Todd. I adore her. So we flew her out to New York. And again, seeing all of this talent, lot of really just amazing people. It's just looking for that one little thing. There's so much like vaudeville comedy in the way that the director directs it, that it's a very specific type of actor that fits. So it's fun. But yeah, amazing people. I'm humbled to be in the room with people when they come in. And if anyone here is an actor, let me just tell you flat out, we're all rooting for you. If we're behind the table, we want you to succeed. If you ever feel nervous and you're going in and you get those jitters, let it go, because we all want you to just be yourself, and we all are rooting for you. It's not like the movies where they're like, next, maybe for some bigger Broadway shows. But, for the most part, that's the thing about this community. It's, with smaller theaters, we're all really rooting for each other. And I love that about Seattle, especially.
That's true. I mean, I don't know, obviously, all of the theaters locally, but there's enough of them that I've been fortunate enough to get credentialed for to start reviewing shows. And they all know each other. And they definitely help each other out. Like you were just saying, like you were getting some things from Driftwood for your production. And I know they probably got stuff from maybe Village or what, all these kind of things, just kind of work with each other because they're all trying to do the same thing in terms of putting on the best show that they can. Yeah. And you're all in the same area. So you're going to see each other. These circles are small.
Yeah. Well, the throne from Disenchanted that who Sleeping Beauty gets wheeled out onto, or Belle when she's strapped in to that for her song. That chair, that throne that was my prop that I made. We used that at Center Stage when I was in their holiday panto with them, with Rapunzel. So the queen sat in that throne. So, all this stuff gets moved around, and it's really wonderful.
That's awesome. And, I see we have about 1.5 minutes left of our interview. Yeah. You've been just amazing to talk to. Again, I think this is something that I've really probably wanted to talk to in terms of topical things and really like diving into them and not just like doing it for a minute or two, but actually, having that dialogue. I think it's really, really important and necessary. And I know you said you don't like to, self-promote or things of that nature, but in the next minute, what kind of things would you like to let people out to know about that either you're involved in or that they should check out, or whatever you can think of for a minute?
The main thing right now, Center Stage Theater in Federal Way, centerstagetheater.com. We're doing our fundraiser right now, help stay afloat. So we're raising $35,000. We had a big fundraiser here in this space where I had 2 green screens going on and all of that. And that was the kickoff. And then we had an auction. We're still finishing up our fundraising right now. So please feel free to go to centerstagetheater.com and donate. Some of the shows that were happening this year are getting shifted to next year. The Panto that usually is the holiday show that I'm in drag as the Dame, which you should definitely come if you're in the area. That's getting bumped to May. So we're all trying to do our best. So if you can donate, please go to centerstagetheater.com and donate.
Brad, again, thank you so much for being my guest today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, no, it was awesome. I think we might have to talk about having you come back on and have a further discussion about topical things, because this was an amazing interview. So thank you so much for your time.
Great. Thank you so much. Thanks.
All right. Take care.
All right. Bye.
Bye.